Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to look at marriage, but through a totally different lens, the lens of economics. Yep, you heard that right. It's an approach that treats your relationship like it's the biggest investment you'll ever make. And it asks a pretty bold question. Are you getting the best possible return on it?
So, let's start with a scenario. On one side, we have Robert. He's an entrepreneur, and his day has been an absolute disaster. His energy drink company is in crisis mode. A major investor just backed out, his marketing director quit, and now a key supplier is threatening to double their price. He is, to put it mildly, completely strung out.
And then on the other side, there's his wife, Joanne. She is just completely and totally drained. She spent her day on super tense conference calls. She skipped lunch, nearly got into a car wreck rushing to pick up the kids, and she still has a huge stack of bills to deal with. All she wants to do is just relax and go to sleep. Okay, so this brings us to a classic marital dilemma, right? As the slide asks, should Joanne have had sex with Robert? I mean, given their completely opposite states of mind and what they each need in that moment, what is the right move? Well, there are a few ways to look at this. Robert's view is pretty simple. Yes, she's my wife, and I have needs.
Joanne's friends, on the other hand, would probably say, absolutely not. She needs to set some boundaries. But then there's a third, kind of unexpected perspective, the economists.
And that third answer really gets to the heart of a universal truth. Marriage is hard work. It's basically a nonstop puzzle of figuring out how to allocate and manage scarce resources, which, sounds a lot like running a business. In this work we're talking about, it comes in so many different forms. There's the admin work, right? The chores, the bills, the schedules. Then you have the emotional work, actually communicating and trying to solve arguments. There's the constant work of compromise on everything. And maybe the toughest one of all, the work of just being nice when you really, really don't feel like it. And to tackle all of this work, you're always dipping into this shared pool of resources that are, let's be honest, always scarce. You only have so much time in a day, you only have so much energy, you only have so much money. And as Robert and Joanne's story perfectly shows, you've definitely got a limited amount of libido. So how in the world do you manage this domestic economy? How can you possibly allocate all those scarce resources to keep everybody happy? Well, this is exactly where the economist's answer comes back in. The core idea is something called Spousonomics, and it's pretty much what it sounds like. It's all about taking the principles of economics and applying them directly to your relationship. It totally reframes marriage. It's not just a partnership, it's an investment. And the goal of any investment is to get the best possible return. So, an economist would tell Joanne to just strip away all the emotion for a second and just do the math. What's the cost here? A few minutes of sleep? Maybe a cookie? And what are the benefits? An orgasm, a happy partner, and a peaceful night. According to the source, she actually did this little calculation and decided the benefits were worth it. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, economics? Seriously? Isn't that the dismal science? It sounds so cold and calculating. Why on earth would you turn to that for something as personal and emotional as marriage, instead of, therapy? Well, this slide really shows you the key difference. Where traditional advice gets kind of bogged down in feelings and history and this endless battle of who's right, Spousonomics just cuts right through that. It shifts the entire focus. It's way less about blame and much more about finding a logical, forward-looking solution that just works. And look, this isn't just some clever theory someone dreamed up. This whole framework is built on a ton of serious research by two journalists, one from the Wall Street Journal and the other from the New York Times, who both specialize in economics and data. To really get to the bottom of this, they hired professionals to conduct a massive survey. We're talking data from over 1,000 people all across the country, asking more than 60 really deep questions about the real-world highs and lows of being married. But they didn't stop there. They also interviewed dozens of leading economists. They dove deep into everything from game theory to behavioral economics. And then they went on this huge listening tour across the US, talking to hundreds of real couples to see how these ideas actually played out in their living rooms. So, after all that work, what's the ultimate payoff here? If you start thinking like an economist in your relationship, what is the promised return on this marital investment? The authors promise some pretty tangible results. The quote says it all, really. Have more sex, wash fewer dishes, argue more effectively, and get your spouse to do things. It's about creating a more efficient partnership with way less friction by basically negotiating your way to a happier life together. What's really cool is that these economic concepts give you a whole new language for marriage's most annoying problems. That endless fight about chores, that's just division of labor. It's about assigning tasks based on who's most efficient, not who's supposed to do them. Feeling taken for granted because your partner knows you'll always pick up the slack? That is a classic case of moral hazard. Can't let an old argument go? That's loss aversion, where the pain of losing feels so much worse than the pleasure of winning that you just keep the fight going. And mismatched libidos? That's just simple supply and demand. And that brings us to our final thought. If you apply this lens to your own life, what's the primary scarce resource? Is it time, energy, money, something else that you and your partner are constantly negotiating over? Thinking about it in economic terms might just reveal the path to a better return. Thanks for watching.